"Hey, step out of the car!" Officer Darren Reynolds's voice cut through the night like a blade, harsh and commanding. The blinding beam of his flashlight hit Judge Elise Montgomery square in the eyes as she sat calmly behind the wheel. She blinked, against the light, but kept her composure. Slowly she opened the door and stepped out, her posture straight, her dignity unshaken. "License and registration." Reynolds barked again, not even giving her a moment to speak. "Could you please lower your light, officer?" she asked, voice even. "I said license and registration," he snapped, his tone sharper, hand drifting casually toward his holster. Moving deliberately, Elise reached into her purse. "I'm just getting my wallet," she said. "Make it quick," he growled. She handed him her documents with a steady hand, heart steady, despite the heavy air around them. Reynolds glanced at her license, and then smirked. "Judge, huh? Not tonight, you're not." But what Reynolds failed to notice was the small dashboard camera silently recording everything, capturing his every word, and his every mistake. If you believe dignity shouldn't depend on the color of your skin, hit like and subscribe, and drop justice in the comments. This story is about to show what real accountability looks like. The Charleston County Courthouse stood like a sentinel, its columns and marble steps gleaming in the morning light. Inside, beyond the metal detectors and security checkpoints, Judge Elise Montgomery walked the polished hallways with purpose in her step and fire in her eyes. At 53, Elise carried herself with the quiet authority that came from a lifetime of having to be twice as good to get half as far. Her tailored black suit and silver-streaked hair, pulled into a perfect bun, projected the image of a woman who had no time for nonsense, while her warm brown eyes revealed the compassion that had guided her through 20 years on the bench. As the first black female judge in Charleston Circuit Court, Elise had shattered ceilings and weathered storms that would have broken lesser souls. She'd stood firm through hate mail, death threats, and the constant whispers that she was too soft, too harsh, too black, too female, always too something for someone. Today, those whispers didn't matter. She had more pressing concerns as she pushed open the heavy wooden door to her chambers. "Morning, Judge." Her clerk, Marcus, greeted her with a cup of coffee and a folder. "Your calendar's packed today, but there's something you should see first." "What's that?" Elise asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "There's a complaint filed against Officer Darren Reynolds, 5th one this month." Elise paused, her cup halfway to her lips. "Reynolds?" The name sent a chill down her spine. "Yes, ma'am. Same officer who pulled you over last night." Elise set down her coffee, suddenly uninterested in its warmth. "Let me see the file." As she flipped through the pages, a pattern emerged. African American drivers, routine stops, excessive force. Each complaint dismissed, each officer exonerated. The system working exactly as it was designed to, protecting its own. "There's something else," Marcus said quietly, placing a USB drive on her desk. "The dash cam footage from your stop last night." Elise stared at the small device. "How did you get this?" "Let's just say not everyone at the station believes a badge should be a shield for bad behavior." Her fingers closed around the drive. "Thank you, Marcus. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your power? Tell us in the comments, and if you believe in justice rising, hit like and subscribe." The courtroom doors burst open as Officer Reynolds strode in, uniform crisp, shoulders squared. He scanned the room, nodding to fellow officers before approaching the court clerk. "Where's Judge Parker?" he demanded. "I need to get this warrant signed right away." The clerk looked up, unfazed. "Judge Parker is in another courtroom. Judge Montgomery will be presiding today." Reynolds scoffed. "I don't have time for this. When will he be available?" "She'll be here momentarily," the clerk replied, emphasizing the pronoun. Elise stood in the doorway, watching Reynolds, his back to her. She stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. "Officer Reynolds," she said, her voice steady. "I believe I can help you with that warrant." "What would you do if someone disrespected you professionally? Would you stay calm or fight back instantly?" Drop your answer below. Also hit like and subscribe. Reynolds turned slowly, recognition dawning on his face. His eyes narrowed, jaw tightening, as he realized who stood before him. "Judge Montgomery," he said, voice flat. "I didn't realize you'd be here." Elise maintained her composure, approaching with measured steps. "This is my courtroom today, Officer Reynolds. I understand you have a warrant that needs signing." The air between them crackled with tension. Reynolds's hand twitched slightly, toward his belt, a subtle, unconscious movement that didn't escape Elise's notice. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, the honorific dripping with sarcasm, "this is a time-sensitive matter. Perhaps Judge Parker—" "Judge Parker is unavailable," Elise cut in, extending her hand. "The warrant, please." Reynolds hesitated, clutching the folder to his chest. The courtroom had grown quiet, the few present attorneys and clerks watching, the exchange with held breath. "I'd prefer to wait," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. Elise's expression remained impassive, but her eyes hardened. "Officer Reynolds, are you refusing to present your warrant to a sitting judge?" "I'm requesting a different judge," he replied, shoulders squaring. "It's within my rights." "On what grounds?" Elise asked, her voice dangerously soft. Reynolds shifted, uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "I have concerns about impartiality." "Based on what?" Each word was precisely enunciated, like stones dropping into still water. "Based on our previous interaction," he answered, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Elise's eyebrow raised a fraction. "You mean when you pulled me over last night?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly masked. "I conduct dozens of traffic stops. I don't recall every driver." "Then perhaps you recall saying, 'Judge, huh?'" "Not tonight, you're not." Reynolds blanched, his confident facade cracking. Or perhaps," Elise continued, her voice still, low but gaining strength, "you recall unnecessarily keeping your hand on your weapon throughout our interaction, or demanding I exit my vehicle for a simple taillight violation." The courtroom had grown so silent that the gentle whir of the air conditioning seemed thunderous. "You don't understand," Reynolds hissed, leaning closer, his voice a harsh whisper. "You people always think you're above the law." "You people?" Elise repeated, loud enough for others to hear. Reynolds realized his mistake too late. The court reporter's fingers had paused over her stenotype. The bailiff stood straighter. Two attorneys exchanged glances. "I meant judges." He backpedaled, sweat beading at his temple. "You judges." "That's not what you meant," Elise said, her calm unbroken. "And we both know it. If you were standing in Judge Montgomery's shoes, would you show mercy or hold the line? Comment, your choice below. And if you stand for real accountability, like and subscribe now." "Your Honor," Reynolds said, his voice strained as he tried to regain control, "I'm just trying to do my job." "As am I," Elise replied evenly. "And my job is to ensure that warrants are properly vetted before they're signed." She held out her hand again. "The warrant, Officer Reynolds." With visible reluctance, he handed over the folder. As Elise opened it, her eyes scanned the contents, her expression unchanging. "This warrant is for a search of a residence belonging to—" She glanced up. "Marcus Johnson?" Reynolds nodded. "We have reason to believe he's in possession of controlled substances." "And what evidence supports this belief?" Elise asked, flipping through the sparse documentation. "Confidential informant," Reynolds replied tersely. "It's all there." Elise closed the folder. "This warrant is incomplete. There's insufficient probable cause established. I cannot sign this." Reynolds's face flushed red. "That's bullshit." He caught himself. "That's not right. Judge Parker has signed dozens of these for me." "Then perhaps Judge Parker has been remiss in his duties," Elise said, handing back the folder. "I need more than an unnamed informant's word." Reynolds snatched the folder, his control slipping. "This is exactly why—" "Why what, Officer Reynolds?" Elise asked, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. "Why you prefer not to bring your warrants to a black female judge. Why you believe I should recuse myself based on your misconduct during a traffic stop. Please enlighten the court." The veins in Reynolds's neck bulged. "You're making this about race." "No," Elise said, her voice carrying throughout the silent courtroom. "You made it about race when you profiled me last night. When you used the phrase, 'you people.' When you assumed I wouldn't have the authority or courage to question your incomplete warrant." She stepped closer, not intimidated by his height or his badge. "What I'm making this about is justice and accountability. If someone crossed a line they couldn't take back, would you call them out? Or let the world decide? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too." "Bailiff," Elise called, her voice firm. "Please escort Officer Reynolds to the witness stand." Reynolds's face contorted in confusion. "The witness stand? What for?" "You're going to testify under oath about last night's traffic stop," Elise explained, walking toward her bench. "Since you've called my impartiality into question, we need to establish the facts." "You can't do this," Reynolds protested, but the bailiff was already moving toward him. "I absolutely can," Elise replied, seating herself. "This is my courtroom, and you've raised serious allegations about my conduct. Alternatively, you can withdraw your objection to my review of your warrant application and return with proper documentation." Reynolds glanced around the courtroom. Several officers had entered, drawn by the commotion. He caught the eye of his sergeant, who stood near the back wall, arms crossed. "Fine," Reynolds muttered. "I'll get the additional documentation." "One moment," Elise said, stopping him before he could leave. "Court reporter, please enter into the record that Officer Darren Reynolds has questioned my impartiality based on a traffic stop he conducted last night, during which I was the driver." The reporter's fingers flew across the keys. "Further," Elise continued, "enter that I am recusing myself from any cases involving Officer Reynolds going forward, not because of bias, but because he has created a situation where the appearance of impartiality might be questioned." She looked directly at Reynolds. "And finally, enter that I am formally requesting a review of Officer Reynolds's traffic stop conduct by the Internal Affairs Division." Reynolds's face drained of color. "You're making a formal complaint?" "I'm ensuring transparency," Elise corrected. "If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear." "This is a witch hunt," Reynolds hissed. "No, Officer Reynolds," Elise said, her voice carrying. "This is accountability, something you seem unfamiliar with. When everyone's watching, would you keep pushing for truth or let it go? What would you do? Share your decision in the comments. Also hit like and subscribe." Elise adjusted her glasses, looking out at the now crowded courtroom. Word had spread quickly, and various courthouse staff, attorneys, and even a few judges lined the walls. "I'm calling a special hearing," she announced, her voice carrying authority, "in the matter of judicial conduct and police oversight." Reynolds remained standing, frozen in place. His sergeant had moved closer, clearly concerned. "Your Honor," the sergeant interjected, "perhaps we could discuss this privately in chambers." Elise shook her head. "No, Sergeant Miller. Privacy is what allows these situations to perpetuate. Transparency is what will heal them." She pressed a button on her bench. "Mr. Williams, please bring in the audio-visual equipment." Marcus entered, wheeling in a television and computer setup. He connected the USB drive, nodding when ready. "Officer Reynolds," Elise said, "I'm going to play the dashboard camera footage from last night's traffic stop. You will have an opportunity to explain your conduct afterward." Reynolds stepped forward, panic evident. "This is irregular, Your Honor. There are procedures." "Yes, there are," Elise agreed, "and they rarely result in meaningful accountability. Today, we're trying something different." She nodded to Marcus, who pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing Elise's car being pulled over. Reynolds's voice came through clearly, his tone condescending, his words laced with subtle but unmistakable racial undertones. The footage showed his hand resting on his weapon, his aggressive stance, his dismissive attitude when she identified herself as a judge. When it ended, the courtroom remained silent. Reynolds stared at the floor, his sergeant's expression grim. "Officer Reynolds," Elise said quietly, "would you care to explain your conduct?" He looked up, defiance warring with fear in his eyes. "I was following protocol." "Which protocol authorizes bias?" Elise asked. "Which training manual suggests intimidation as a first response? Would you let injustice slide if it kept the peace, or would you risk everything to call it out? Share your choice in the comments. Like and subscribe if you believe silence is never the answer." "Your Honor," Sergeant Miller intervened, stepping forward. "On behalf of the department, I want to express our—" "Don't," Elise cut him off. "Don't apologize until you've heard everything." She turned to Marcus. "The file, please." Marcus handed her a thick folder. Elise opened it, pulling out several documents. "Officer Reynolds," she said, "this isn't about one traffic stop. This is about a pattern." She held up a stack of complaint forms. 17 complaints in the past year, all dismissed, all filed by people of color. Reynolds's face hardened. "Those were investigated and cleared." "Were they?" Elise asked, laying the papers down. "Or were they simply filed away? Because I have here affidavits from 3 other judges who've had similar experiences with you. Judges who, like me, didn't file formal complaints because they knew the system would protect you." She placed another document on the bench. "I also have statistics showing that you pull over black drivers at a rate 4 times higher than white drivers, and that you search their vehicles at 7 times the rate." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what? Not fair? Not true?" Elise's voice remained steady. "The numbers don't lie, Officer Reynolds." She leaned forward. "But here's what concerns me most. 2 excessive force complaints that were buried. One from a young man who ended up hospitalized after a routine traffic stop. Another from a woman who was dragged from her car while her children watched." Reynolds looked to his sergeant for help, but Miller's expression had grown stony. "Judge Montgomery," Miller said, "I wasn't aware of the extent—" "Few people are," Elise replied. "That's by design." She addressed the courtroom at large. "For too long, we've allowed these incidents to be handled internally, quietly, away from public scrutiny. We've accepted the narrative that these are isolated incidents rather than symptoms of a systemic problem." Reynolds's face flushed with anger. "This is a setup. You're trying to destroy my career because I didn't kiss your robe last night." "Officer Reynolds," Elise said, her voice cutting through his outburst, "you're destroying your own career. I'm merely shining a light on it." She turned to the court reporter. "Let the record show that I am formally requesting an investigation by the Department of Justice into the patterns and practices of the Charleston Police Department, with particular focus on racial disparities in traffic stops and use of force." A murmur went through the courtroom. Sergeant Miller's posture stiffened. "Furthermore," Elise continued, "I am ordering the immediate suspension of Officer Reynolds's warrant privileges in this court until the investigation is complete." Reynolds took a step forward. "You can't do that." "I just did," Elise replied, calmly. "And if you continue to display this level of disrespect in my courtroom, I'll hold you in contempt." She turned to Miller. "Sergeant, I suggest you remove your officer before he makes matters worse for himself." Miller nodded, grasping Reynolds's arm. "Come on, Darren, let's go." Reynolds yanked his arm away. "This isn't over," he warned, glaring at Elise. You're right, she agreed. It's just beginning. As Reynolds was led from the courtroom, Elise addressed the onlookers. This court stands in recess until tomorrow morning. At that time, I will hear from anyone who wishes to speak about their experiences with Officer Reynolds or others like him. She struck her gavel, the sound echoing like a promise. What would you do if the whole room watched you bring someone to justice? Stay strong or show mercy? Let's talk about it also. Hit like and subscribe. The call came just after Elise had returned to her chambers. Her phone lit up with the Chief Justice's number. "Hello, Richard," she answered, settling into her chair. "Elise," his voice was grave. "I've just had the police commissioner and the mayor on the line. They're concerned about your actions today." Elise closed her eyes. "I'm sure they are. They're suggesting that perhaps you should recuse yourself from any cases involving the police department. Temporarily, of course." "Of course," Elise echoed, tracing the grain of her wooden desk. "And what do you think, Richard?" There was a pause. "I think you've opened a door that many people would prefer stayed closed. Is that a criticism?" "It's an observation," he replied carefully. "Along with another observation, this could affect your nomination to the federal bench." The words hung in the air between them. Elise had been shortlisted for a federal judgeship, a position she'd worked toward her entire career. "I see," she said finally. "So I'm being asked to choose between justice and advancement." "That's not what I said," Richard countered. "I'm simply making you aware of the political realities." Elise looked at the framed photo on her desk. Her grandmother, who had cleaned courthouses but never imagined her granddaughter would preside, in one. "The political reality," Elise said slowly, "is that we cannot continue to allow badges to be shields for bad behavior." "Elise!" "Thank you for the call, Richard," she interrupted gently. "I've made my decision." She hung up, then pressed her intercom. "Marcus, schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Would you show mercy to someone who never showed you respect? Or would you let the consequences do the talking? Let us know in the comments also. Like and subscribe. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras when Elise emerged the next morning. She approached the makeshift podium with steady steps, her dark blue suit a contrast to the white marble behind her. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "Yesterday, in my courtroom, I took an extraordinary step. I challenged the conduct of a police officer who has a documented history of racial bias in his interactions with the public." Camera shutters clicked rapidly as she continued. "I did this not to target one individual, but to address a systemic issue that has been allowed to fester in darkness. Today, I am going further." She placed a thick folder on the podium. "I am publicly releasing the complete record of complaints against Officer Darren Reynolds. Complaints that were dismissed without proper investigation. I am also releasing statistical data showing racial disparities in traffic stops, searches, and arrests throughout our department." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. From the corner of her eye, Elise saw the police commissioner and mayor hurrying up the steps. "Additionally," she pressed on, "I have formally requested that the Department of Justice conduct a pattern or practice investigation into our local police department. This is not about punishing good officers, of whom there are many, but about ensuring that badges cannot be used as shields for those who abuse their power." The police commissioner reached the edge of the crowd, his face flushed with anger. "I understand that my actions may have professional consequences," Elise acknowledged. "I may lose my chance at a federal appointment. I may face censure from those who believe judges should remain silent in the face of injustice." She straightened her shoulders. "But I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. For all people, not just those who look like me or those with power. That oath matters more than my career." The mayor had reached the podium now, whispering urgently to an aide. "I'm also announcing the formation of a community oversight committee," Elise continued undeterred. This committee will include representatives from neighborhoods most affected by over-policing, civil rights attorneys, and retired law enforcement officers committed to reform. She looked directly into the cameras. Accountability cannot be optional in a just society. Not for any of us. The police commissioner stepped forward as if to speak, but Elise held up her hand. Finally, I am establishing a legal clinic within the courthouse to assist citizens who believe they've been subject to biased policing. This clinic will be funded by my own salary for as long as necessary. She gathered her papers. The time for whispers is over. The time for action is now. As she turned to leave, a reporter called out, "Judge Montgomery, has Officer Reynolds responded to your allegations?" Elise paused. "This isn't about Officer Reynolds anymore. This is about all of us deciding what kind of justice system we want to have. If someone crossed the line and humiliated you, would you have forgiven them, or made sure the world saw what they did? Drop your take in the comments. Also hit like and subscribe." 3 months later, Elise sat in her chambers reviewing the latest report from the Department of Justice. The investigation had expanded beyond Officer Reynolds to include departmental practices, training procedures, and accountability mechanisms. A knock at her door preceded Marcus, who entered with a newspaper. "You'll want to see this," he said, placing it on her desk. The headline read, "Officer Reynolds among 4 indicted by federal grand jury." Below was a photo of Reynolds being escorted out of the federal courthouse, head down, no longer in uniform. "The system finally worked," Marcus said with a slight smile. "The system didn't work," Elise corrected him. "People work to change the system." She skimmed the article, noting the charges: civil rights violations, falsification of records, witness intimidation. The evidence had been overwhelming, once investigators actually looked. Another knock at her door. This time it was Richard, the Chief Justice. "May I come in?" he asked. Elise nodded, gesturing to a chair. "I owe you an apology," Richard said without preamble. "I asked you to choose between justice and your career. I was wrong." Elise raised an eyebrow. "What changed your mind?" "The numbers," he admitted. "The DOJ report showed that Reynolds wasn't an outlier. He was a symptom. And when I thought about how many times I might have looked the other way," he shook his head. "I'm too old to keep making the same mistakes." He placed an envelope on her desk. "The Federal Nomination Committee has reconsidered your application. They'd like to interview you next month." Elise looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Why now?" "Because they realize that courage is a qualification for the bench," Richard replied. "And you have it in spades." As he left, Elise turned to her window looking out at the courthouse square. A demonstration was taking place. Not a protest, but a community gathering. People sharing stories, registering voters, building connections. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. "Mom, they're talking about you on CNN again. You're trending. Judge Montgomery effect." Elise smiled, remembering the fear she'd felt that night when Reynolds had pulled her over, and the resolve that had followed. One moment of injustice had cascaded into a wave of change. Her intercom buzzed. "Judge Montgomery? They're ready for you in courtroom 3. "Thank you," she replied, rising and straightening her robe. "I'm on my way." Justice wasn't just about verdicts and sentences. Sometimes it was about having the courage to strike the first match and light the way forward. Some say forgiveness is strength. Others say it's surrender. If you were the judge today, would you forgive the antagonist or let him face justice fully? Tell us below. Like and subscribe too. The camera pans across the courtroom where it all began, now filled with community members attending a forum on police reform. The space that once witnessed confrontation now hosts conversation. Judge Montgomery stands not on her bench, but among the people, her voice clear and strong. "Change doesn't come from courtrooms alone," she says. "It comes from each of us refusing to accept that things must stay as they are. She gestures to the diverse crowd before her. Officers, activists, neighbors, all engaged in the difficult work of building a better system. One person with courage can start a movement, she continues, but many people with conviction can transform a community. The camera lingers on faces in the audience. Determined, hopeful, committed. Justice isn't just a word on a building. It's an action we take every day. It's a choice we make when no one is watching. If you enjoyed today's story, like, share, and subscribe for more justice stories like this.